Forget my daughter slapped me, at her own wedding, in front of her groom, in front of the guests, in front of the flowers I paid for and the dress I helped her choose. Her eyes burned with fury as she hissed, "You always ruin everything." The music stopped. People gasped. I tasted blood in my mouth, but the sting wasn't from her hand, it was from the betrayal. I stood frozen, the mother of the bride reduced to an unwanted guest. That's when I knew I had one gift left to give. And she'd remember it forever. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. It wasn't always like this. I wasn't always the woman you saw standing there, slapped and humiliated. Once I was the whole world to that girl. Her name is Clare. And for the first 12 years of her life it was just her and me. My husband, George, passed when Clare was barely a year old, heart attack in his sleep. One minute he was next to me, his hand resting gently on my hip like he always did. The next he was gone. I still remember how the silence that morning felt too heavy, too still. I shook him 3 times before I understood. So I raised Clare alone. I worked nights at the diner just off Route 7 and cleaned offices early mornings. There were days I'd come home and collapse still wearing my uniform. But when Clare woke up and toddled toward me, babbling nonsense with her arms in the air, I found the strength to keep going. Love will do that to you. It will wring you out and fill you up in the same breath. She was a bright, curious child. Always asking questions. Always drawing on paper on the walls, once even on the dog. She loved books about queens and castles. So I called her my little monarch. When she turned 8, I stitched her a princess costume out of old curtains and lace I found at a thrift store. She wore it everywhere, school, grocery store, even to bed. People laughed. She didn't care. She knew she was loved. We didn't have much, but I made sure she never felt the lack. On weekends, we'd go to the farmer's market and split one apple fritter between us. On rainy days, we'd sit by the window and play what if stories. What if we lived on a boat? What if I opened a bakery? What if Daddy were still here? Those were the questions I couldn't answer. So I'd tell her stories of her father instead. How he danced with me barefoot in the kitchen. How he painted her nursery yellow before she was born. How he once stayed up all night just to feel her kick in my belly. I wanted her to know love wasn't just a word. It was work, it was loyalty, it was being there. As Clare got older, things shifted, but gently. Puberty brought mood swings and slammed doors. Still, every night, I left a glass of water on her nightstand and a sticky note with a heart or a quote. She never said anything, but she kept every note in a little tin box. She graduated near the top of her class. I cried so hard during her speech, someone handed me tissues and asked if I was okay. I was more than okay. I was proud. That's all I ever wanted, to raise a girl who knew her worth. She got into college on scholarship and studied business. I sold my engagement ring to help her furnish her apartment. You shouldn't have, she said, tears in her eyes. But I told her that ring was never about the diamond, it was about building a future. That future was hers now. When she came home during breaks, she was different, sharper, more refined. She used words like efficient and practical when she talked about emotions. She didn't laugh as often, but I told myself that was just adulthood settling in. Life wears the shine off all of us eventually. Still, we had our moments. We made her favorite stew every winter. We rewatched old Disney movies. On her 24th birthday, she surprised me with a necklace. A simple gold locket with a tiny photo of her and George inside. I held it like it was made of glass. I don't know when the distance started creeping in. Maybe I ignored it because I didn't want to believe it was there. But something shifted after she met Dylan. Even so, I clung to the good years, as if holding them close could keep them alive. I kept her room the same. Same lilac walls, same star stickers on the ceiling, same bookshelf with dog-eared romance novels. I vacuumed it every week even though she hadn't stayed in it for months, just in case she decided to come back. Just in case she needed me. Because that's what mothers do. We wait. We endure. We forgive before the apology even forms. So when she got engaged, I wept with joy. I thought, this is it. This is our fresh start. I'd walk her down the aisle. I'd pin her veil. I'd hold her hand just before the music started. I'd whisper, your daddy would be so proud. But that's not how it happened. And as much as I wish I could still believe in the version of her I raised, the truth is, that girl is gone. The first time I noticed something was wrong, it was a whisper. not a shout. Claire had just introduced me to Dylan. He was handsome, no doubt, sharp suit, polished shoes, eyes that flickered more than they focused. He smiled wide, but his handshake was limp, like he couldn't be bothered. Still, I smiled back. I was willing to give anyone a chance if they made my daughter happy. But even during that first dinner, something unsettled me. Claire tells me you raised her all by yourself, he said, glancing around my little living room. That must have been character building. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. The way his eyes skimmed over the threadbare curtains and the faded sofa cushions like they were something to pity. Claire laughed nervously and changed the subject. I didn't say anything. I just noted it and folded it away like a letter I didn't want to read yet. After that, the visits grew fewer. She stopped popping in on Sundays. When I called, she'd answer with, "Can I call you back?" And often didn't. I chalked it up to wedding planning. Everyone gets busy. But there was a coldness creeping in, one I hadn't felt from her since high school. She used to call me Mama in texts. Then it became just Mom. And then finally, M. Her tone changed too. She'd ask about the house not with warmth or nostalgia but calculation. "So you're still living alone there? Must be hard to maintain. You ever thought about downsizing?" Downsizing? That house had been in George's family for generations. He carried me across the threshold the day we got married. Claire took her first steps on that porch. She buried her first hamster under the maple tree out back. Downsizing wasn't just a suggestion, it was a subtraction of memory. Still, I smiled through it. I told myself, she's just trying to help. She's thinking like an adult now. I didn't want to believe anything worse. Then came the money request. First it was small. "Hey Mom, can you help cover the florist deposit?" We didn't realize how expensive peonies were. Of course, I mailed the check the same day. Then it was the venue. Then alterations. Then the catering. Every time I offered, she'd say thank you, but less like a daughter, and more like a client closing a transaction. I asked once if she wanted me to co-sign a credit line to help. Her answer stuck to my ribs like something sour. "No offense, Mom, but your credit's kind of outdated. Dylan's parents are handling most of it anyway." Outdated. Like me. The more I tried to be involved, the more she pushed me to the sidelines. I offered to host a small bridal shower at the house. She hesitated, then said, "Maybe something more modern. You know." So I wasn't hosting. I wasn't speaking. I wasn't even helping pick the dress. Dylan's mother was. Suddenly, she was the one Claire called elegant and refined. Words she used to say about me when she'd watch me sew a hem or make my pot roast. I began to notice how she'd glance at me when I spoke around Dylan, as if silently asking me to stop talking. Like I was embarrassing. Too warm, too soft, too much. Once at a dinner, I laughed at an old story about Claire hiding peas in her pockets to avoid eating them. Dylan raised an eyebrow and said, "You really love dragging out those rags to riches stories, huh?" Claire laughed. I didn't. First, I blamed him. It was easier. Maybe he was controlling her. Maybe he was planting ideas in her head. But as weeks turned to months, I couldn't ignore the truth. The coldness was hers. The distance was hers. And the daughter I'd built my life around was becoming someone else. Someone I didn't recognize. I noticed how she touched Dylan's arm when she needed something. How she rolled her eyes when I mentioned traditions. She once snapped when I offered her my wedding veil. The one I'd preserved in tissue paper for decades. "Mom, no offense, but it's dated. I want something original." Everything I had was now dated. Even me. I sat in the living room one night and stared at that tin box of sticky notes she used to collect. I wondered if she still had it. Or if she'd thrown it out along with the parts of herself that still remembered who we were. It's strange how love shifts. How it turns from fire to ash when you're not looking. I wanted to shake her to ask, what did I do wrong? But I was afraid of the answer. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. Maybe love isn't enough when ambition gets in the way. And yet I kept showing up. I kept offering. I kept hoping. Because I was her mother. Because I remembered the girl who called me her hero. Because I didn't yet know how far she'd already left me behind. The day of the rehearsal dinner felt off from the beginning. Claire hadn't responded to my last 2 texts about whether I should bring anything. I arrived early anyway, carrying a pan of her favorite baked mac and cheese, The one she used to beg for every birthday. The venue was a fancy country club just outside town, white linens, gold-trimmed chairs, champagne glasses already half full. It was beautiful, sure. But it wasn't us. I walked in smiling, ready to help set up. But no one looked at me. Not Claire. Not Dylan. Not even the planner I'd helped pay for. I found a place to set the dish in the back near the kitchen, then walked toward Claire, who was busy talking to Dylan's mother. I touched her elbow lightly. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. She barely turned. "Oh, Mom. You made it." No hug. No smile. Just 3 words clipped in tight. Her fiancé's mother, Linda, looked me over with a thin, polite smile. "It's so kind of you to come. We've got everything handled, so no need to worry about anything." Everything handled. Like I was some distant aunt instead of the mother of the bride. I nodded and stepped back. I wasn't there to cause a scene. I just wanted to be part of the moment. Then the toasts began. Dylan's father stood first. He went on about their beautiful union, and how grateful they were to welcome Clare into their family. His voice boomed, confident, proud. Then came Linda. She gushed about Clare. From the moment I met her, I knew she was meant to be part of us. She's elegant, thoughtful, so refined. And such a good match for Dylan. I waited thinking Clare might say something, might acknowledge me. But she didn't. She just raised her glass and clinked it against Dylan's. The coordinator asked if anyone else wanted to speak. My heart raced. I stood slowly, hands trembling. "Just a few words," I said, walking toward the front. Claire's eyes widened. Not with joy. With panic. "Mom, maybe we should." She started, but I was already holding the mic. "I just wanted to say how proud I am of you," I said softly, looking at her. "You've grown into a strong, beautiful woman. And your father, if he were here, he'd be bursting at the seams." I smiled, my voice cracking. "He used to say that love is built, not found. And I hope you both keep building brick by brick." A few people clapped politely. I handed the mic back and returned to my seat. As I sat down, I heard Dylan whisper to Claire, "That was weird." She nodded. Weird. That word hit harder than any insult. Like I was some odd relic they had to tolerate. Later that evening, I overheard one of the bridesmaids say to another. She wasn't supposed to speak. Claire said she might get emotional and make it about herself. I swallowed hard and left early. At home, I opened the closet where I kept my wedding dress. I had planned to bring my veil to give Claire before the ceremony, along with a tiny silver brooch her father had bought on their last family vacation together. I sat on the bed and stared at it, but it didn't feel like she wanted anything from me anymore, except maybe what I had. 2 days later I saw it. An email. She had forwarded something from her lawyer to mine. A draft of a new will, one I hadn't approved, hadn't even seen before. It named Claire and Dylan as joint inheritors of the house. Not after my death. Immediately. There were words like life estate, and early transfer of deed. I sat at the table, hands shaking. I called her. "Claire," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why did I get an email about a will? I never signed this." There was silence. Then, "Oh, I thought Dylan mentioned it to you. It's just a draft. You listed yourself as owner." "Well, technically it's just a transfer on paper. It would still be your home until..." "Until what?" "Until I die." "Don't be dramatic, Mom." "Dramatic." There it was again. "You've been planning this," I said, the truth dawning like a cruel sunrise. "You were going to do this without telling me." "It's not like that," she snapped. "Dylan's parents said it's smart to consolidate assets before we apply for loans. It's a formality." "Formality." Like my home, my life, my memories were paperwork. "I raised you in that house," I whispered. "You don't need a big house anymore," she said. "You're alone. You should be somewhere safer anyway. Condo maybe. With ramps and elevators." "And what if I say no?" A pause. Then we'll have to talk about what's reasonable." I hung up. And I cried. Not the loud kind of cry. Not the wailing kind. The quiet kind. The kind that comes when you realize someone you love has been slowly erasing you behind your back. That was the night I stopped being her mother in the way I used to be, and started becoming someone else entirely. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept picturing George's hands, Rough from building, gentle when he cradled our daughter. He built that house. Every plank in the floorboards, every nail in the banister. He used to say, "This house will outlive us both. It's our legacy." And now Claire wanted to sign it away, like it was nothing more than leverage for a mortgage. I needed answers. Real answers. The next morning I waited until Claire left her phone on the coffee table, while she went to the bathroom. She was visiting me briefly, mostly to check in and drop off the wedding program draft. It was only our third time face-to-face in 2 months. She was distracted, glued to her screen, barely looking at me. When the bathroom door closed, I picked up her phone. I shouldn't have. I know that. But mothers, we have instincts. And mine had been screaming for weeks. I opened her messages. One thread was titled "The Plan Ring." My heart tightened as I tapped it open. It was a group chat between Clare, Dylan, and his parents. Dylan. Got the revised will. Lawyer says once the paperwork clears, we can start the refinance process. Linda, his mother, excellent. Make sure she doesn't get cold feet. Play nice. Keep up the grateful daughter act for a few more weeks. Claire. Trust me. She'll go along. She always does. I just have to deal with the guilt trips. Then another message. Dylan. Worst case, we push for guardianship later. If she starts declining, it's game over. Guardianship. They were planning to take legal control over my life if I didn't comply. Like I was some doddering burden who couldn't be trusted to make my own decisions. I felt sick. I set the phone back down gently. Claire came out moments later, talking about centerpieces, asking if I had an extra tablecloth she could borrow for the cake table. I nodded. I didn't say a word. Inside I was unraveling. After she left, I went into the attic and pulled down a box labeled "For Claire. When she's older." It held every letter I'd written her over the years. Birthday notes, advice, little reminders of who we were. I held one up to the light. Never let someone speak for you. Use your voice. Stand up even when your knees shake. I sat on the floor, letters spread around me, and cried until the sun went down. They weren't just trying to push me aside, they were trying to erase me completely. The house, my independence, even my voice. That week, I started observing things differently. At the bridal boutique, Linda was speaking to the manager as if she were the one paying. Claire didn't correct her. At a brunch with Dylan's family, they referred to the house as the young couple's starter home. Claire nodded, laughing, sipping mimosas. And then there was the neighbor Janet, who bumped into me at the market. She leaned in gently and said, "I heard from my cousin that Dylan's been telling people the deed transfer is already done." It wasn't. Not legally. But the lie had already taken root. Even the way Claire looked at me had changed. She used to see me as the woman who could fix anything. Now she looked at me like I was in the way. I replayed Dylan's message in my head over and over. Worst case, we push for guardianship. That's when it truly hit me. This wasn't just neglect. This was a scheme. A cold strategic plan. They were waiting me out. I remember George's voice in my mind. Don't let anyone steal your name off the deed while you're still breathing. He always spoke plain. And he'd never let anyone take what we built. Not without a fight. So I decided to stay quiet. Watch. Gather. I went to the lawyer. Not my usual one. A new one, younger, sharper. I didn't say much on the phone. I just said I needed a will review. He made time for me that same afternoon. And I made myself a quiet promise. If they wanted to see how strong I was, I'd show them. I would give Claire a wedding gift she'd never forget. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. The next time Claire came over, I didn't offer tea. I didn't bake her favorite blueberry scones. I didn't ask about the wedding or the dress or the flowers. I simply sat in my chair by the window, knitting needles in hand, though my fingers weren't moving. She walked in like it was her house. No knock. Just the sound of heels on hardwood and her voice calling. "Mom? Are you home?" I didn't answer right away. She appeared in the doorway holding a garment bag. "I brought my rehearsal dress. I need to leave it here for tomorrow." I looked up slowly. "You could have asked first." She blinked. "What?" "It's still my house. You could have asked." Her face tightened. "Why are you being like this?" I set the knitting in my lap. "Like what, Claire?" She sighed, clearly annoyed. "Look, if this is about the venue, Or not being part of the planning, I'm sorry, okay? It's been busy. Dylan and I are under a lot of pressure. Pressure to take what doesn't belong to you. She froze. I stood, my voice quiet but firm. I saw the messages, Claire. The ones about the house. The will. Guardianship. Her lips parted slightly, then shut again. She tried to recover. That was taken out of context. No, I said. It wasn't. Don't lie to me. You were planning this behind my back. With strangers. You were going to trick me into signing my home away. She laughed nervously. Mom, come on. It was just an idea. Dylan's parents said it might make things easier with the bank. Whose idea was guardianship? Was that yours? She didn't answer. I walked toward the window and stared out at the maple tree. Its leaves had just begun to turn. I gave you everything, I said softly. And you were ready to treat me like a burden to be managed. Not a mother. Not even a person. That's not fair. No, I cut in, turning back to her. What's not fair is raising a child with every bit of strength you have, and watching her sell you off like an old sofa. She swallowed. You're twisting this. No, I said. You are. You think just because I'm quiet I'm weak. Because I age I forget. But I see everything, Claire. I saw you fading away from me long before this wedding. For a moment there was silence. Just the ticking of the old kitchen clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then she said something I'll never forget. Well, what do you even need all this space for, Mom? You're alone. You don't host. You barely go upstairs anymore. Wouldn't it be easier if you just moved into a condo? I said bitterly. Or a nursing home. Is that what you were going to suggest? She didn't answer. Did Dylan help you rehearse that line too? Something flickered in her face then. Anger. But also something else, shame maybe. Guilt trying to grow in poison soil. Then without thinking she said, You're making this so difficult. I'm trying to build a life here. You're acting like some spiteful old woman. There it was. Spiteful. Old. 2 words I never imagined my daughter would throw at me like stones. I didn't respond. I simply walked to the hallway, opened the coat closet, and pulled out a folder I had tucked behind the winter scarves. I handed it to her. What's this? My counter-proposal, I said. Inside was a notarized document, one that reversed every financial move I had made in her favor. A full amendment to the will, removing her name entirely. A letter explaining my reasons. And a clause. If she contested it, the entire estate would go to a local shelter for women and children. Her eyes widened as she flipped through it. You're serious. Dead serious, I said. You'd rather give everything to strangers than your own daughter? I met her gaze. At least they never tried to steal from me. For the first time in a long time she was speechless. You should go, I said. I'll see you at the wedding. She didn't move right away. Then she turned sharply, grabbing the garment bag, and walked out without another word. The door clicked shut, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. Later that day, my neighbor Helen stopped by with a jar of homemade jam. She didn't ask questions, but she squeezed my hand gently and said, You did what you had to do, Marjorie. It meant more than I could say. 'Cause I wasn't losing my mind. I was reclaiming it. I spent that night cleaning the guest room, not for Claire. For me. For the future. Whatever it would be. I took down the framed photo of Claire's graduation and replaced it with an old black and white of George holding baby Claire in the backyard, both of them laughing like the world hadn't yet had a chance to hurt them. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. But I also felt something else, something I hadn't in months. Prepared. I'd called the week before, after that confrontation with Clare. My voice was steady on the phone, but inside I was cracking apart. I didn't tell him everything, just enough. His name was Aaron, a friend of a friend's son. Young, sharp, respectful. The kind of man who looked you in the eye and didn't rush your words. He offered me tea. I declined. I needed my head clear. I understand you'd like to make changes to your estate, he said gently. Yes, I replied. And I want it to be ironclad. We sat down in his quiet office, lined with thick books and awards. The smell of lemon polish and printer ink filled the air. I opened my purse and pulled out the documents I'd gathered over the past week, bank statements, the original deed to the house, letters from George, Even the messages I'd printed from Claire's phone. I didn't have to explain every detail. Aaron saw enough to understand. He leafed through everything, occasionally raising an eyebrow, but never interrupting. When I finished, I said, I want her out of the will completely. Not $1. Not one brick of that house. He nodded slowly. We can do that. And you're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He took a deep breath. We'll add a no contest clause. If she tries to fight it, the estate goes to a designated charity. Do you have one in mind? I smiled faintly. Yes. There's a women's shelter in town. The same one I donated to after George died. They help women start over. He looked impressed. That's thoughtful. It's justice, I said. We spent the next 2 hours drafting every word with precision. Every sentence was like a small wound healing. Every clause was a stitch pulled tight. There were moments it hurt more than I expected. When I listed Claire's full name under the removed heir section, I had to pause. My hand trembled as I signed. It's a strange thing, to unwrite your child from your future. Like carving her name off a tombstone you once etched with love. But I didn't stop. Because love without respect is just a memory. And memories don't protect you when people come for what's yours. At the end, Aaron looked me in the eye. This is a strong will. It will hold up, Marjorie. I nodded. Good. Because I'm tired of being a wall people think they can push over. As I stood to leave, he handed me a copy of the signed document and said, You're brave. I looked at the papers in my hand. No. I'm just finished pretending everything's fine. I walked out into the warm afternoon sun and felt something strange power. Not anger. Not revenge. Just power. The kind I hadn't felt since George and I first stood on that empty plot of land and imagined a life together. On the drive home, I thought about how things used to be. Claire in the back seat, legs swinging, asking me if we could stop for ice cream. George humming beside me, tapping the wheel. I held on to those memories, but I didn't let them weigh me down. When I got home, I placed the new will in the fireproof box beneath the bed and locked it. I didn't feel lighter, but I felt safe. Later that evening, I went out to the garden. The roses had begun to droop. I spent an hour clipping the dead petals, watering the roots, brushing dirt from my hands. I didn't cry. Not that night. There were no tears left to spend on someone who saw me as a means to an end. That house, my house, stood quietly behind me, watching, listening, holding everything I had poured into it over the years. And I realized something then. This wasn't just about property. It was about dignity. Claire had made her choices. Now I had made mine. The morning of the wedding rehearsal, I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the dress I'd chosen weeks ago. A simple navy blue with lace sleeves, elegant but understated. George would have liked it. He used to say I looked best in blues, said it brought out the fire in my hair even after it started graying. I had laid out the silver brooch he gave me for our 10th anniversary. I hadn't worn it in years, but today, I wanted to wear something that reminded me of who I was, not just who I'd been reduced to. That's when the knock came. It wasn't Claire. It was Linda, Dylan's mother. She didn't ask to come in. Just walked through the screen door like she owned the place. I thought I'd stop by to gently suggest something, she said, clasping her hands together like a woman at a prayer meeting. Claire's very stressed. You understand. Emotions are high. I said nothing, just waited. She looked at my dress laid across the bed. That's lovely, but perhaps something more muted might be better. The wedding palette is soft earth tones, and navy might be distracting in photos. Distracting. She actually said it. I stood there, hearing the subtext loud and clear. You don't belong in this picture. Not as you are. Linda smiled that tight, patronizing smile. It's just a suggestion, of course. We all want what's best for Claire's big day. Of course, I said, matching her smile, though mine didn't reach my eyes. Tell Claire I'll be there. Exactly as I am. She left without saying goodbye. That was the last courtesy extended my way. The next morning I arrived early at the chapel. The sky was overcast. A thick gray that looked like it might open up at any second, but I didn't mind. I liked the weight of it. Honest weather. The inside of the church buzzed with energy. Flowers being adjusted, chairs aligned, photographers checking their angles. I stepped inside quietly, holding my gift for Claire. a small velvet envelope tucked into my handbag. I hadn't seen her since our last conversation. But today, I wasn't here for reconciliation. I was here to finish what she started. The ceremony was moments away when I spotted her. Clare stood near the altar, radiant and cold. She wore a beautiful dress, a satin blend with lace embroidery, the veil falling in gentle waves down her back. She looked just like she used to when she played dress-up as a child, except now her eyes didn't search for me. They scanned the crowd, skipping right over me. When she finally did look at me, she didn't smile. She walked over, careful to keep her hands on her bouquet. "I thought we agreed you'd wear something lighter," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We didn't agree," I replied calmly. "You told me. I decided otherwise." She glanced around nervously. "Can you not start something today?" I reached into my purse and pulled out the velvet envelope. "I brought you a gift." Her brow furrowed. She didn't take it. "I suggest you open it after the ceremony," I said. "Privately." "What is it?" "A reminder," I said, "of where you come from, and what you've left behind." She stared at me for a long moment, lips pressed tight, then snatched the envelope and tucked it into her clutch. "You're unbelievable," she muttered before walking away. I took my seat in the back row. Not with family. Not among the smiling faces or the front pews saved for important people. Just a chair near the exit. Alone. The music started. She walked down the aisle on Dylan's arm, not mine. I wasn't invited to do that. I wasn't even acknowledged. I watched as they exchanged vows, kissed, and received thunderous applause. And when it was over, I slipped out before the crowd. But not before I saw her open the envelope. Not before I saw the look on her face. Inside was a copy of the revised will. A letter explaining why I made the changes. And a flash drive containing all the messages, all the recordings, all the evidence of their little plan, including that comment about guardianship. And one more thing. A simple handwritten note. "You hit me in front of your groom, but I'm still your mother. So I'm giving you the truth. That's my wedding gift to you." I don't remember much of the drive home. My body moved on instinct. But I remember the moment I stepped into my house, closed the door behind me, and felt the silence settle around me like a cloak. Not heavy this time. Solid. I had nothing left to give her, and everything left to protect. I didn't plan to return to the reception. I thought the envelope would speak for itself. I thought I'd said everything I needed to say. But something gnawed at me as I sat on the porch, rocking gently in George's old chair. It was too easy to disappear. Too easy to let them twist the story and paint me as bitter, unstable, out of touch. They needed to hear it. All of them. So I changed into a deep gray shawl, pulled my hair back, and drove to the hall where the reception was already in full swing. I parked in the far lot, behind the row of catering vans, and walked in through the side entrance unnoticed. Inside, laughter and music swirled together. The bride and groom were being announced again at the head table. Clare beamed like a queen. For a moment I saw my little girl again, the one who used to wear paper crowns and tell me I was the best cook in the kingdom. And then she saw me. Her face fell. She didn't move, but Dylan did. He stood and started toward me, his smile thin, eyes flashing. "Mrs. Harper," he said, voice tight. "I think you should leave." I looked past him to Clare. "Read the envelope yet?" Clare stood slowly. People were beginning to notice. Conversations paused. Forks hovered midair. "I said," Dylan repeated, "you need to go. This is our night." I raised my voice, not a shout but a tone full of steel. "I won't stay long. I just want to say one thing." All eyes were on me now. Guests craned their necks. Linda looked like she'd bitten into something sour. Claire's hands trembled. "You all see a bride tonight," I said, stepping forward. "You see white lace, centerpieces, and happy smiles. But you don't see what it cost to get here. And I'm not talking about money." A hush fell. Even the DJ turned off the music. "I raised Clare by myself," I continued. "I worked nights, missed meals, skipped doctor visits so she could have what she needed. I never asked for thanks. I only asked for respect." Dylan muttered. "Okay, this is insane." But no one moved. I turned to Clare directly. "You plan to take my house. You had legal drafts drawn up. You mocked my age, called me difficult, talked about guardianship like I was already gone. Her face paled. I pulled out a second envelope, this one for the room. And here is everything. Emails, texts, recordings, evidence of what Claire and Dylan were planning. If anyone wants to know the truth, they're welcome to read it. Gasps echoed through the room. A cousin reached out and took the envelope gently from my hand. Claire, I said quietly, I loved you more than I loved myself, but I won't let you walk over me. Linda rose from her seat, stammering. There must be some misunderstanding. No, I said, locking eyes with her. There isn't. Then I turned and walked out. No one followed. I stepped back into the warm night air, the stars beginning to flicker above the horizon. I thought I might cry. I didn't. I drove home in silence, windows down, letting the wind carry away the last threads of the daughter I once knew. Later that night my phone buzzed. Messages flooded in, some angry, some stunned, some quietly supportive. A niece told me she never trusted Dylan. A cousin asked for the shelter's donation link. Even one of Claire's bridesmaids wrote, "You deserved better. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner." I turned off the phone. I'd said my truth. Let them sit with it. Do you think the mother made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The next morning the world was quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet, like the hush after a storm. That kind of silence where everything holds its breath, waiting to see what still stands. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold, staring out the window at the backyard. The maple tree swayed gently in the breeze, scattering golden leaves across the grass. George used to rake them into piles for Claire to jump in. She'd laugh so hard she'd hiccup. That memory came like a bruise, tender, unexpected. My phone buzzed again. I didn't pick it up. They were still talking, friends, family, strangers online who'd seen clips someone posted. I hadn't expected that. Apparently, someone had recorded part of my speech. It was making the rounds. People had opinions. Of course they did. Some called me brave. Some called me cruel. I didn't care about either. I wasn't looking for applause. I just wanted the truth out. Still, it felt strange being talked about like a character in a story instead of a mother with a broken heart. By noon the doorbell rang. It was Janet from next door. She held a small plate of lemon bars. "Thought you might want something sweet," she said gently. "Heard what happened." I invited her in, though neither of us said much. She placed the plate on the counter and gave my shoulder a soft squeeze before leaving. That was the only visitor all day. I walked the house slowly that afternoon. Each room held a story. The scuff on the hallway wall from Claire's tricycle. The faint pencil marks behind the pantry door where we measured her height every birthday. The chipped tile in the bathroom from when George dropped the mirror while trying to hang it himself. I touched them all one by one like reading Braille through my past. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. Just was. The next day I took a walk down to the park. The air was crisp, clean, and smelled of damp leaves. I sat on the bench by the duck pond, the same one where George used to feed the birds with Claire on his lap. A young woman sat a few feet away, bouncing a baby on her knee. She looked at me and smiled. I smiled back. She didn't know who I was. That was a comfort. By the time I returned home, there was an envelope in my mailbox. No name, just handwriting I recognized instantly. Claire's. Inside was a short note. "I don't know what to say to you anymore. I don't know how to undo the hurt. I guess I thought you'd always be there no matter what I did. I guess I stopped seeing you as a person. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for everything." See, no apology could erase the betrayal. But it was something. I folded the note and placed it in the same tin box where I kept all those old sticky notes I used to leave by her bed. Even after everything, part of me still loved her. But that part no longer ruled me. That night I cooked a full meal for the first time in weeks. Pot roast with carrots and mashed potatoes. I set one plate, lit a candle, and sat alone at the table. I didn't cry. I didn't talk to the empty chair across from me. I just ate. And I let myself feel the quiet as a kind of healing. Later, as I washed the dishes, I thought about George. What he would have said. What he would have done. He was always the stronger one, the firmer parent. But he had a soft spot for Claire. He would have been devastated. Maybe even more than me. But he would have understood what I did. And I think he would have agreed. Because love doesn't mean letting someone walk over you. Love, real love, knows when to let go. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing on solid ground again. A week passed. No calls. No visits. Just the occasional rustle of leaves outside and the quiet creak of the floorboards when I walked through the house. At first, I thought the silence would swallow me. But something unexpected began to happen. I started noticing the house differently. The way the morning light fell through the kitchen window. The softness of the carpet under my feet. The worn wood of the banister George carved by hand, still strong after all these years. It didn't feel like an empty house anymore. Felt like mine again. One afternoon, while organizing the attic, I found a box labeled Hope House, flyers and letters. I had forgotten about it. Years ago, after George passed, I donated to a small women's shelter on the edge of town. They had sent thank you cards, photos, updates. I kept every single one. I sat cross-legged on the dusty floor, reading letter after letter from women who had fled bad marriages, poverty, abuse. Each one carrying hope and gratitude like a flame in the dark. And just like that, I had an idea. What if this house, my home, my history, could be more than a battleground over inheritance? What if it could be a sanctuary? I made some calls. Hope House had grown but was still struggling for space. Their director, Maria, remembered me immediately. "Marjorie Harper," she said on the phone, warmth in her voice. "You were one of our earliest donors. We still tell your story." I asked her if we could meet. She came to the house that same week. Maria was in her 40s, full of quiet energy. As she walked through the rooms, her eyes lit up. "This place, it feels lived in. Like it has soul." I nodded. "It does. My husband built half of it himself. We raised our daughter here. We walked the halls together, stopping in what used to be Claire's room. I want to turn it into something that matters," I said. "Not just for me. For women who need a new start." Maria looked at me, eyes full. "You don't know how rare that kind of gift is, Marjorie. Most people cling to what they've built. They don't think of letting others in." "I've clung long enough," I said. "It's time to open the doors." And so the plan began. We'd start with 2 rooms, convert them into temporary housing for women transitioning out of shelters. A shared kitchen, a shared garden, a sense of safety. Over time, maybe more. That evening, I pulled out George's old tool set and started cleaning the spare bedroom myself. It smelled of dust and lavender. I opened the windows, let the breeze in, and scrubbed until my arms ached. I cleared out closets. Donated clothes I hadn't worn in years. I found old puzzles, knitting supplies, board games, and decided to keep them. All things a quiet night could be made of. I called the carpenter who once helped George fix the porch. He remembered us. Said he'd come by next week to help with repairs. The house began to feel alive again. Not just full of memory but full of purpose. One morning as I weeded the garden out back, I heard a small voice behind me. "Excuse me." I turned and saw a young woman, maybe in her late 20s, holding a child, no more than 3 years old. I heard this place was going to be part of a shelter? Maria sent me. I stood slowly, wiping my hands on my pants. "We're not ready just yet," I said. "But would you like some lemonade?" She hesitated, then nodded. Inside, I poured 2 glasses and let the little boy sit on Claire's old play mat. He found a wooden block and started stacking. The woman, her name was Elise, told me her story. Her husband had left. The apartment was gone. She had been sleeping on couches, sometimes in her car. Hope House didn't have a bed available for another week. "You can stay here," I said before I even realized the words had left my mouth. "Just a few days. Until your spot opens." Her eyes filled instantly. "Are you sure?" I smiled. This house was always meant to hold more than just me. That night I made stew. Elise offered to set the table. The boy giggled as he ate his roll, crumbs everywhere. And for the first time in years the kitchen sounded like a home again. Not just a museum of memories, but something real. Something warm. I climbed into bed with sore arms and a full heart. A new plan was in motion. And this time it wasn't about legacy. It was about love. The house began to change, not in structure but in spirit. It started with Elise and her son Ben. They stayed for a week just as planned. But during those days something settled in me, like soil ready for planting. Their laughter filled the corners that had long stood silent. I found myself leaving the door open more often, baking 2 loaves of bread instead of 1, making enough soup for more than just me. Maria came by regularly now. She brought boxes, linens, hygiene kits, gently used toys. We turned Claire's old bedroom into a cozy shared space. I hung a quilt George's mother made on the wall, and Elise added a crayon drawing of a tree with a crooked heart that Ben had made. By the end of the month, we had 2 women staying with us, Elise, and a young woman named Trina who had escaped a dangerous marriage. Trina barely spoke at first. She kept her eyes low, folded clothes like it was her only purpose. But one night, I left my knitting in the living room, and by morning, she had added a perfect row of pearls to the end of the scarf. "Who taught you that?" I asked gently. She didn't answer. But she smiled. And that was enough. The kitchen became our gathering place. We cooked together, shared quiet meals, and listened to the radio. Sometimes the women would talk about their past, sometimes not. I never asked. I just listened when they were ready. We planted herbs in the garden, hung wind chimes, put a new coat of paint on the porch. People from the community began stopping by, dropping off donations, leaving handwritten notes of encouragement in the mailbox. One afternoon, Janet came over with a tin of cookies and whispered, "Whatever this is, Marjorie, it's beautiful." I smiled. It's home. Not long after, I heard a knock on the front door. I opened it and froze. It was Emily, Claire's daughter. My granddaughter. She stood there, backpack slung over one shoulder, a hesitant look on her face. "Hi, Grandma," she said quietly. It took everything in me not to cry. "Come in, sweetheart," I said, stepping aside. She hadn't been by in months. Not since before the engagement, before the whispers. But now here she was, taller, more serious, but still with the same wide eyes she had as a child. We sat on the porch steps. She sipped sweet tea while I tried not to bombard her with questions. "I saw the video," she said, "at the wedding. And I read the letter." I held my breath. "I didn't know, Grandma. I didn't know what they were doing. I thought they were just trying to help you move somewhere easier. That's how they made it sound." I nodded. "I know, darling. That's what they wanted everyone to think." She looked down at her hands. "Mom's not talking to anyone right now. She's embarrassed. Angry. I think mostly at herself." "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "Just done pretending." She nodded. After a long pause, she asked, "Can I come by sometimes? Help out? Maybe garden with you again?" Tears pricked my eyes, but I smiled. "You can come by anytime you want. This is your home too if you want it." From that day on, Emily visited twice a week. She helped Trina install curtain rods. She read to Ben while Elise cooked. She and I weeded the garden just like we used to when she was small. And for the first time in a long while, I realized something deeply, profoundly true. Real family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when everything else falls apart. The women in that house, Elise, Trina, Emily, they weren't guests anymore. They were family. We celebrated Trina's birthday that month with cupcakes and paper crowns. Elise got a part-time job at the library. Ben started preschool. I opened a small notebook and began tracking donations, ideas, requests. We called the house Marjorie's place, a nod to the woman I used to be, and the one I was still becoming. At night, I'd walk through the halls with the lights dimmed, hearing faint murmurs of laughter or lullabies sung low. It wasn't noise. It was music. The music of life starting over. And though Clare hadn't returned, I no longer waited for her shadow to appear in the doorway. I had stopped waiting, because I was surrounded now not by expectation, but by people who saw me, who valued me, who showed up. This was my family. Not the one I built from biology, but the one I found through truth, through pain, through love rediscovered. The knock came on a Thursday evening. The air was thick with the scent of stew simmering on the stove, and Trina was in the living room reading aloud to Ben. I was folding laundry at the dining table when I heard it, 3 slow, uncertain knocks. I knew it was her before I even opened the door. Claire stood on the porch in jeans and a loose cardigan, her hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked tired. Not just from lack of sleep, but the kind of tired that seeps into your bones after running from yourself for too long. I opened the screen. She looked up at me. "Hi, Mom." I nodded. Claire. She hesitated, her hand still on the strap of her purse. Do you have a minute? I didn't answer right away. Just stepped back enough to let her in, but not too far. She entered slowly, glancing around like she barely recognized the place. Her eyes landed on the photos lining the hallway. New ones. Elise and Ben in the garden. Trina helping repaint the porch. Emily laughing in the kitchen. No photos of her. I led her to the dining table. She sat. I returned to folding dish towels. She looked at the neatly stacked clothes. I remember you used to fold everything so perfectly. I could never match your corners. I still can't, I said dryly. She gave a short, nervous laugh. Then silence again. Finally, she said, I wanted to come sooner. I just didn't know what to say. You didn't need to say anything, I replied. Silence already said a lot. She flinched just slightly. I read the will, she said quietly. The real one. The letter. Everything. I deserved it. I didn't respond. I let her sit in the weight of her own words. I was selfish, she continued. I let Dylan convince me that you were holding me back. That the house was just a resource. Not a home. Not a memory. She paused. When you showed up at the wedding, I was angry. Not because you embarrassed me, but because you forced me to see what I had become. I sat down across from her. So why are you here now? She looked me in the eye. Not to ask for anything. Not to fix it. Just to face it. That was the first honest thing she'd said to me in years. I lost a lot, she said. Dylan walked out a week after the wedding. Said I was a liability now. The house, the money, he was never after me. Just what I came with. I nodded slowly. Now you understand. I do. I think I do. We sat in silence. Not the kind that chokes. The kind that lets things breathe. Finally, she asked, do you hate me? I looked at her. My daughter. My once little girl in scraped knees and princess dresses. The woman who had, somewhere along the way, learned to smile with her teeth and not her heart. No, I said. I don't hate you. But I don't trust you. And that's harder to repair. She swallowed, her eyes glassy. I know. You hit me, I said softly. In front of everyone. And you didn't even flinch. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I've thought about that moment every single day. I nodded. So have I. She looked down at her hands. Emily told me about what you're doing here. About the women. The shelter. She said it's beautiful. It is. She loves being here. She's welcome anytime. Claire looked up. Am I? That was the question. The honest one. I took a breath. You can visit. You can be part of the healing. But I won't hand you the keys to it. Not anymore. She nodded slowly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. That's fair. She stood, unsure of what to say next. I didn't offer a hug. She didn't ask for one. At the door, she turned back. You gave me everything, and I repaid you with betrayal. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I see it now. I looked at her steady. I hope you keep seeing it. Then she was gone, and the door closed softly behind her. I stood there for a moment, letting the quiet settle back into place. Not as a wound, but as a choice. Claire had visited, and maybe she'd return. Maybe not. But I had stopped waiting. I had started living. And the women in this house, the laughter, the work, the purpose, they were the ones who showed me what real love looks like. Not the kind that demands, but the kind that gives without taking. Would you have forgiven her? Let us know in the comments. The sign went up on a bright Saturday morning. It was simple, wooden, hand-painted, mounted just above the porch steps. Marjorie's house. No plaque, no flashy ribbon, just those two words. And beneath them, in smaller letters, a home for healing, hope, and second chances. I stood beside Emily, my arm linked in hers, as the small crowd gathered on the lawn clapped. A few reporters from the local paper were there, neighbors, donors, and the women who had passed through these rooms in recent months. Elise held Ben's hand while he proudly waved a tiny paper flag. Trina stood beside Maria, smiling shyly but brightly. I never thought I'd see the day. Not like this. Not with joy in my chest where bitterness used to live. After the small ceremony, people walked through the house, admiring the freshly painted walls, the shared kitchen with its warm oak table, The quiet reading room where the fireplace had been restored. Every room had touches of its past. George's woodworking, the old photos I'd reframed, a few of Claire's childhood drawings I'd decided to keep. People saw the beauty, but only I felt the weight of memory behind the walls. This place was built on sacrifice, heartbreak, and love, the real kind, the hard kind. The kind that keeps showing up even when it's unwelcome. Later that afternoon, I sat on the porch alone, watching the last of the guests drive away. The sky was a deep orange, the kind of color that made you feel like the day was taking a bow before the night crept in. Emily came out carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. "You did it, Grandma," she said, sitting beside me. "We did it," I corrected, smiling. She nodded. "I think Grandpa would have been proud." I looked out toward the garden where George once stood with his hands on his hips, shaking his head at the squirrels eating his tomatoes. I could still see him there in my mind, alive in every plank and corner of this home. "I talk to him sometimes," I admitted. Emily didn't laugh. She just nodded. "What do you say?" "Depends on the day," I said. "Sometimes I thank him. Sometimes I ask if he saw what happened. Sometimes I just tell him I miss him." We sat in silence for a while, sipping our drinks. Then she asked, "What will you do now?" I took a breath. "Live, I think. Really live. Maybe teach Ben how to bake. Maybe help Trina apply for school. Maybe just sit out here and listen to the world move around me." She smiled. "That sounds nice." Inside the house, laughter echoed faintly. Elise and Maria laughing over something. The clink of dishes in the sink. Ben's high-pitched giggle. I never thought this house would be full again. But it was. Full of life. Full of second chances. And even though Claire hadn't come back, I knew she might one day. I'd left a place for her at the table. Not out of obligation but out of grace. Because that's what this house had taught me. That love doesn't always look like you expect. Sometimes it comes from broken places. Sometimes it walks in the door quietly with nothing but a backpack and a tired smile. And sometimes, love is the door you leave open. Not to be walked through, but to remind yourself that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means releasing the weight. Before going to bed that night, I walked the hallway one last time. I stopped by the guest room, now labeled Room 2. Trina had added a small potted plant on the windowsill. A touch of green. A sign of roots taking hold. I went into my own room, sat at my desk, and wrote a letter to George. I told him everything. About Claire. About the betrayal. About the women now filling the house with new memories. About how I finally stopped waiting to be seen, and started seeing myself again. And at the very end I wrote, "They thought they could take the house. Instead I gave it life again." I folded the letter, placed it in the top drawer beside his old pocket knife, and turned off the light. Marjorie's house stood still that night, but not empty. It breathed. It remembered. And it lived.